I want you to imagine a room where power, pressure, and uncertainty collide. A long table, a dozen energy executives, and one expectation hanging in the air: move faster. This is not a meeting about oil alone. It is a meeting about time, political time versus industrial time, rhetoric versus reality. President Trump believes Venezuela's oil can be brought back online quickly. Executives know better. They know oil does not respond to speeches. It responds to infrastructure, security, and rules that last longer than a news cycle. So they arrive with a careful answer. Yes, production can rise, but only a few 100,000 barrels a day, and only if sanctions ease, and only if conditions above ground cooperate. If you want to understand how global energy decisions are really made, not in slogans, but in constraints, stay with me. Because what happens in that room will echo far beyond Venezuela. And to see why this moment matters, we first need to step back and define the real problem. Picture this: a closed room, a long table, silence before the storm. Around that table sit the most powerful energy executives in the world. Across from them stands one demand: move faster. President Trump wants Venezuela's oil flowing again, soon, very soon. But oil does not obey politics. It does not bend to confidence. It answers only to physics, infrastructure, and stability. The executives know this. That is why they come prepared with a careful message. Yes, production can rise, but not overnight. A few 100,000 barrels a day. Only if sanctions are lifted. Only if conditions on the ground allow it. Every word is calculated. Every pause matters, because one wrong promise could mean billions lost, and one wrong bet could define the future of Venezuela's oil. If you want to understand how real power works in the global energy system, stay with me, because before solutions come pressure, and before pressure, there is the problem itself. At the center of this moment is a simple question: how fast can Venezuela really produce more oil? Not in theory, not in speeches, but in reality. The United States now controls Venezuela's oil sales. And with that control comes expectation. Expectation that output can rise quickly. Expectation that companies will return. Expectation that capital will follow power. But the industry sees a different picture. They see sanctions that still choke production. They see heavy crude that needs specific supplies to move. They see infrastructure that has aged, weakened, and fractured. So executives are trying to narrow the conversation away from billions in new investment toward modest, measurable gains. A few 100,000 barrels a day, not miracles. Not full restoration. This is not resistance. It is risk management. Because committing too much, too soon, creates a trap. Once expectations are set, they are hard to reverse. And that tension between what is politically desirable and what is industrially possible defines everything that follows. To understand why Venezuela reached this point, we need to look backward. Because today's limits were built over decades. To understand Venezuela's oil today, you have to start before the collapse. Before ideology, before sanctions, before the system began eating itself, in the late 20th century, Venezuela was an energy powerhouse. Oil was not just an export. It was the spine of the state. Then politics changed the rules. Control replaced competence. Loyalty replaced expertise. Investment slowed. Maintenance was deferred. Talent left. Oil fields kept producing, but only because momentum carried them forward. Infrastructure aged quietly. Pipelines weakened. Refineries became fragile. Over time, production declined not from one shock, but from accumulation. Small failures stacking on top of each other, year after year. Sanctions later accelerated the fall. They restricted financing. They limited access to technology. They cut off supplies needed to process heavier crude. By the time the world demanded more oil again, Venezuela no longer had slack. Only constraints. This is the key point. You cannot flip a switch on a system that has been hollowed out for decades. And once you see that, the next crisis becomes inevitable. Because pressure, when applied to a weakened system, does not restore it. It exposes it. The first shock does not come from oil fields. It comes from the meeting itself. A room filled with expectation and an unspoken demand for commitment. Executives know what is coming. A push for timelines, a push for numbers, a push for confidence. The president believes production can surge fast. 18 months up and running. Inside the industry, that timeline sets off alarms. Because saying yes in that room is not symbolic. It is binding. It reshapes markets. It moves capital. It creates headlines that cannot be undone. So the industry responds carefully. They offer a compromise. Sanctions relief first, supplies for heavy crude, incremental increases using existing infrastructure. This is not hesitation. It is containment, a way to prevent a political moment from becoming an industrial disaster. Behind the calm language is urgency, because if expectations outrun reality, failure becomes public. And in energy, public failure is punished quickly. If you want to see how systems break, watch what happens when pressure replaces patience. Because the real crisis is not whether Venezuela can produce more oil. It is whether the system is being asked to do it too fast. And that leads us to the deeper mechanism at work. What looks like caution is actually a system protecting itself. Oil production is not just drilling. It is logistics. It is financing. It is security. It is trust. In Venezuela, that system is fragmented. Sanctions restrict who can operate and how money moves. Security concerns raise costs and slow decisions. Legal uncertainty makes long-term planning dangerous. This is why executives talk about existing infrastructure, because building new capacity requires confidence, and confidence does not exist yet. So the mechanism is simple. Do not rebuild, optimize, squeeze more output from what already exists, fix what is broken, restart what is idle. Chevron matters here. It never fully left. It knows the terrain. It has relationships. That makes incremental growth possible. Exxon and Conoco are different. They exited. To return, they need rule of law, security, stability. Without those, capital stays away. This is how the system filters risk. Big players wait. Smaller players move first. And that sets the stage for the second crisis. Because once independence and private capital step in, the balance of power begins to shift. The second shock is quieter, but it may be more dangerous. It begins when smaller players step forward. Independent oil companies, private equity, wildcatters, they have a different risk tolerance. Less patience for politics, more appetite for uncertainty. They do not wait for perfection. They move where opportunity opens. This is why phones begin to ring in Washington. Why officials hear interest from firms eager to enter Venezuela now, not later. But speed changes the system. Smaller firms focus on quick gains. Existing fields, short timelines, lower costs, that can raise output. But it also reshapes incentives. Long-term rebuilding is delayed. Deep structural repair is postponed. The system becomes patchwork. Production rises. But resilience does not. This is the paradox. You get oil faster, but you weaken the foundation for the future. And once that path is chosen, reversing it becomes difficult. Because short-term success creates political comfort. And political comfort removes urgency. That is when ordinary people feel the consequences. As oil production ticks upward, the real impact begins to touch the people. On the ground, the story isn't about barrels. It's about lives. Venezuelans are waiting for a change, waiting for the promises made in rooms like this one to come to life. They want jobs, They want stability. They want the basics: food, healthcare, security. Every barrel of oil that comes out of the ground could mean one more meal, one more job, one more chance for a future. But promises are fragile, and the lives of millions depend on them. For the oil executives, this is an uncomfortable reality. They are making decisions based on risk, not empathy. They are playing the long game, while the people of Venezuela are stuck in the present. But the pressure is mounting, because the stakes are no longer just economic. They are human. In these moments, the industry faces a choice. Will they only do what is necessary to protect their bottom line, or will they take steps to genuinely help rebuild? The answer will depend on how much the industry is willing to sacrifice for political and moral clarity. Because once production rises, the world will watch, and Venezuela's people will ask, what's next? The next ripple of impact is felt beyond Venezuela's borders. When the oil begins to flow, the global system takes notice. This is not just about Venezuela anymore. It's about geopolitics. It's about energy markets. It's about where power is shifting in the Americas. In the US, the White House's pressure may lead to short-term gains, but what about the long-term strategy? What will happen when other nations begin to adjust their policies in response to Venezuela's rise? Venezuela's oil could shift regional alliances. It could strengthen ties with Russia and China, who have long supported Maduro's government. It could prompt other Latin American countries to rethink their own energy strategies. And globally, oil prices could feel the impact. More Venezuelan oil on the market may ease pressure on OPEC. It could reduce competition for supply in key markets. But in the shadow of these gains, the risk grows. Energy security is about more than just oil. It's about trust, stability, and long-term commitments. As Venezuela's oil flows again, the world will be watching. Every move will be scrutinized. Every decision will affect the energy landscape for years to come. And yet, for all the global interest, Venezuela's greatest challenge may still lie ahead. The future of Venezuela's oil is not a single path. It is three possible futures, three scenarios that could shape the country for decades to come. First, the optimistic scenario. Sanctions are lifted. The country stabilizes. Private capital floods in. Oil production climbs steadily, reaching levels seen before Chavez. A new era of prosperity begins, driven by a revitalized energy sector. But this is not a given. Second, the middle scenario. Sanctions relief comes, but gradually. The country remains politically unstable. Oil production rises, but only modestly. The international community remains cautious, and investments trickle in slowly. Venezuela's oil industry gets a boost, but full recovery remains a distant dream. Then, the pessimistic scenario. Sanctions remain in place. The political system fractures further. Oil output stays low. Foreign investment pulls back. The energy sector stagnates. Venezuela's hopes for a full recovery fade, and its oil remains an untapped resource. In each case, the question remains, what is the price of stability? Can Venezuela break free of its past, or will it be trapped by its own contradictions? The path ahead will depend on the balance of power and the decisions made by a few key players. And the decisions made in the coming months could determine which future becomes reality. As we close in on the final moments of this story, the stakes are clear. Venezuela's oil industry is not just an economic issue. It is a political puzzle, a geopolitical chessboard, a test of leadership, vision, and patience. The world is watching. Energy giants are calculating. The people of Venezuela are waiting. What happens in the next few years will set the tone for an entire region. Will oil be the catalyst for rebuilding, or will it become another chapter in the country's long history of broken promises? For the executives in that room, the game is far from over. Their decisions, small or large, will ripple out far beyond the borders of Venezuela, but they must move with care, because every wrong step is magnified by the global spotlight. Now, as we look ahead, it's clear. The real challenge is not whether oil can flow again. It's whether the people of Venezuela will see the benefits, or if the promises of today will evaporate, just like the oil beneath their feet. The world is at a crossroads. The future of Venezuela's oil and its people hangs in the balance. So what will it be? A new dawn for Venezuela's oil? Or another false hope that fades into history? That's the question we all need to answer. Thank you for joining me. And as always, stay tuned for what comes next.